We have two characters who are ostensibly endgame villains for the Owl House, those being Belos, who is most certainly villainous and who wishes to tyrannize everyone and even put an end to which kind, and then you have the more enigmatic Collector. And one must ask, who is really playing whom? Now, fans have been quick to sympathize with the Collector and point out other motives for his actions that are not mere malice or impish cruelty, and have thus thought that Belos is the one manipulating the Collector. And certainly Belos, sneering and cold-hearted, believes that this is what he is doing as well. But whether this is actually the case is a bit of a different story. Is the Collector an innocent figure, pulled into Belos' web of malice? Or does he have other plans that may not be as overt as Belos' genocidal rampage, but deserve to be looked at much more closely instead of being thought of as innocent? Who knows? A lot of analyses on Twitter, Reddit, and especially YouTube I've seen have posited that the Collector is a friendly, if misguided, being who loves to play and hates being alone, and has no intentions to cause destruction and devastation outside of simply following Belos' schemes. And it is certainly true that the Collector does not seem to have any grandiose ambitions, besides merely fulfilling his childlike caprices and pursuing whatever interests pop into his head. And it also certainly seems like that the Collector's desire to not be alone and to escape loneliness and isolation is honest and sincere. Now, the Collector's childlike presentation owes in part to his high-pitched voice and overall playful demeanor, but it's more than that. Like a child, the Collector wants attention and is depressed when he doesn't receive it and feels so cast adrift in a world of isolation and despondency. It would certainly make sense for a being who is just seeking connection to glob on to someone like Belos, who has a tendency to make a lot of pretty-sounding promises that don't actually add up to much in substance. The Collector's anarchic, grinning, impish wildness is the exact opposite of Belos' stern, stoic, imperious demeanor. And I believe that it is entirely reasonable that a lot of fans think that Belos is attempting to manipulate the Collector. Belos has not explicitly provided any signs that this is what he's doing, but considering the promises Belos has made to others and how those promises have not come to pass, it is not unreasonable to believe that Belos is just manipulating the Collector. Think about all those pretty honeyed little words he's given to Hunter about how the Titan has great plans for him, when in reality that was just a method to use Hunter like a puppet and make him do whatever Belos' whim entails. Or think about the promises he made to Lilith that he would help with Edith's curse. And instead, when Lilith, after serving him so faithfully, wanted him to deliver on his end of that promise, he scoffed at her. And think also of the promises Philip made to Luce in the past and elsewhere and elsewhen, portraying himself as this aggrieved, anxious figure who just wants help, when in reality he was scheming to use both Luce and Lilith as sacrifices just to further his own ambitions. This is not a man to be trusted. And the Collector does seem to be in a sort of plight. He is trapped in this liminal, surreal space between the worlds, the same space Luce is stuck in when she's trying to get back to her mother. And it doesn't seem like he has any way of escaping this space aside from partnering with Belos. When he spots King in O Titan, where art thou? He is a bit startled at first, but he wants to get to know King and is disconcerted when King is becoming so anxious and deciding to leave and try and make his way out of this kind of dream, surreal space and back into the physical world. For King, it's just a dream of sorts, but it is a dream in which he is able to visit this little in-between world. And this is not the only evidence we have on the side of the Collector is not as actively malicious as he appears. Think about Luce's selective, fractured memory. There have been multiple instances in this show wherein Luce, after a traumatic experience, remembers what others said to her to be significantly worse than it actually was. The foremost example of this is in the Season 2A finale, Yesterday's Lie, in which Luce has those tense, anxious moments with her mother, and when remembering these moments, thinks of her mother as saying that Luce should never go back to the Boiling Isles and that she should stay on Earth forever, when in reality this is not what Camilla said. Camilla was much more pleading and much more sympathetic and even seeking forgiveness from Luce. She did not want to restrict Luce from ever going to that world again. And on this pattern, we see Luce's memories of the Collector, in which she remembers him saying that he wanted to rend and bruise the entirety of the world on the Day of Unity, when in reality, his words were much more playful and jovial. So, if Luce is wrong about her mother, and if that will come into play later, which I believe it will, I don't believe Luce is going to be forced to stay in the human world against her will, then I believe this will also be true of her interactions with the Collector, who might not be as bad as Luce initially thought him to be. Still, this does not mean that we should believe the Collector to be entirely innocent. I want to stress that. The Collector may be naive and childlike and not committed to this grand, comprehensive plan of malice, but he still takes delight in the creation and destruction of Grimwalkers, and certainly has no qualms about Belos destroying them as blithely as he does. He also has no problem with the draining spell that he is apparently giving to Belos, even though this spell will not only wipe out all magic on the Boiling Isles, but cause many of the residents of the Boiling Isles to perish, even if the Collector is not actively malevolent, and even if he is too much of an impish trickster to ruminate on the consequences of his actions. Those consequences still matter and should not be ignored. The Collector is not purely a good being, even if he is as lonely and isolated as he portrays himself to be. His conception of morality is vague at best, and I do not think his cunning should be underestimated. We don't know a lot about the Collector, and it is true that the show has not devoted nearly as much time to his character as it's devoted to Belos' character. I believe this is more than anything a result of the show being shortened a bit, from 3 full seasons to 2 seasons plus 3 extended final episodes. But it does mean the Collector is more inscrutable, and he has schemes that both we and Belos might not be necessarily aware of. Whether these schemes bode good or ill for the residents of the Boiling Isles is questionable. But we should not think of the Collector as being a harmless individual, because he has proved that he is not. He is well aware of what Belos is planning to do for the most part. even if he is a bit ignorant of Belos' capacity for deception. And he is perfectly alright with the death of all the Grimwalkers and the draining spell as a whole. The relationship between the Collector and Belos is interesting, and it's not as one-sided in terms of one party manipulating the other as one might initially think. The Collector's pain and loneliness is genuine, so is his amusement at torture, destruction, and death. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and do want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Owl House. I'm really interested to see what will happen in Season 3. There are so many directions the show could take this. But most of the small adventures are over and we're in the endgame now. What's your take on the Collector? A character whose lack of a coherent ideology makes him quite difficult to pin down. Quite unintelligible and illegible to us, the audience, leaves us a bit disoriented. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon, promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.